Welcome back to Everyday Economics. It's the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, CEO of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make a tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We're recording this episode on Friday, January 3rd, 2025. Joining me as always, my friend and colleague, Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O, greetings in this new year. Piece of information that came out of Cato, like the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C. Think tank, absolutely liberty-minded. I think you can even say libertarian without agitating anybody and not being wrong. All about the housing, sort of just the housing market and housing data. And the one story that you picked up on that you sent my way that I acknowledged I thought was kind of interesting was in looking at the current housing market and the reactivity to the housing market, by Americans historically has been to move to higher density areas in tighter times, tougher times, where prices are up, maybe choices are down. Americans move into higher density areas. What's the thinking behind that?
I thought this Cato piece was really interesting, but I'm not even sure why they wrote it though. Is I guess my big. So in this article, right? The first thing is they try I call it quibbling over semantics. It's a couple of young policy folks writing about what it means to have a housing shortage. What does it mean to have a shortage in the marketplace? Well, usually shortages arise from the price of a good or services being fixed artificially too low. And if you have a price that is fixed too low and the price is not able to adjust to supply and demand conditions, then you have too high demand relative to supply. And that results in what we call a shortage in economics, right? So at a given market price, you fix the price, you have too much demand relative to supply, usually because the price is way too low. And so producers have no incentive to come into this marketplace and actually produce widgets in order to meet demand, right? In the housing market, we don't have that, right? We don't have that. Prices have been rising over time, and they've been rising pretty fast, right?
Yes.
The price is not artificially too low. We have prices are rising very fast, and people just can't afford homes. A lot of people just struggle to afford housing, right? And so no, you don't have a shortage in the technical sense of the word, but what you have is more families needing housing, potentially living with other people that are not related to them, than you
Right.
have available housing across the country. So don't call it a shortage, call it something else, call it a deficit, call it whatever you want to call it. In fact, what they do in the Post is they write about a paper, an academic paper that was written just a couple years ago in 2022, where the authors say explicitly in their paper, they say, of course, economists do not typically use the term housing shortage to express the quantity reducing effects of supply constraints. While prices may be artificially elevated, any buyer can generally purchase a home at the market price. We nonetheless follow popular discourse and abuse economic terminology. Call it an abuse of terminology, but does it mean that there isn't a big deficit of housing in this country? No, we still have a massive deficit. There are lots of families waiting for the opportunity to own a home, and they can't do it. They can't do it not just because the price is super high. They can't do it not just because mortgage rates are elevated. They can't do it because even if they had the money, the resources on hand today, there's just not enough housing to go around for everyone in this country, right? I looked at the number of families living in the United States, and I compared it to the number of available units back last year in 2023, because that was the latest. Sorry, we're in 25 now, getting
Yeah.
old. In 2023, and the gap was huge, something like 4.5 million homes. Okay, so we would have to build 4.5 million homes to make sure we had enough housing available for every family that's out there, every family,
In
right?
this moment, in this moment.
Exactly, exactly.
So
And
I
so,
mean, so algorithmically, I mean, like how many houses do we have to build, to in theory catch up with this the housing issue that we have nationally?
yeah,
I mean, and how long does it take to build a house, right?
exactly. It takes
You can't
about
just go like that and a house shows up.
it takes 6 to 8 months to build a house. That, from the time it's started to complete it, but we're behind. In this past year, we've built what, about a million homes, right? If the deficit was 4.5 million homes in 2023, and we've had a big surge in immigration, and we've built a million homes, chances are the gap probably got larger in the past year. Okay, so like
Mm-hmm.
this is the reality, and we can, like I said, we can quibble about the terminology we use, right? But ultimately, economists are not there to just talk about economics in this in a bubble. They're here to make sense of things for everyday people, and that's what we do on this podcast. We're trying to make
Right.
sense of things for everyday people. You can, if you're an economist and you don't think this is the word shortage should be used, that's fine. I agree with you because I'm an economist and I understand what a shortage is. But at the same time, we're using terminology that people can actually easily digest. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we did. And I think most industry experts have done the same thing. Um, but this piece, I think, unfairly criticizes some of the work that's been done simply because it used the terminology shortage, the word shortage, where, and I think, oh, look, I have friends at the Cato Institute. They're wonderful people. I used to be an intern at Cato when I was younger, actually.
Yeah.
Spent some time there, right? But ultimately, I think this piece kind of misses the mark. We have to talk about the issues, right? And we have to talk about the issues in a way that everybody can easily understand. And we should not be out there confusing things for people, right? And you put this headline out there and people get confused, right? And it distracts from talking about the real issue that's out there, which is that there are rules in place, restrictions to builders that are preventing the supply response that is necessary in the marketplace to make sure everyone who wants to live out on their own has a home of their own.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the new administration, gets seated here in less than 3 weeks. I mean, as part of what they want to do, with regard to, sort of deregulatory efforts, at a national level. Be interesting to see how much of that makes its way to housing, how much influence ultimately, Washington D.C. has on localities. It's ultimately the cities though that seem to have the ability to say yes or no in a very binary way with regard to building and by in choosing the density that is permitted on a per market basis in their backyard. So we'll see maybe the spirit at the federal level if that somehow catches and makes its way down into
I'm
the local
optimistic.
markets.
I'm optimistic
Okay.
because I think this is the first time, maybe in a long time, that housing affordability is all over the headlines.
Yeah.
Everyone is talking about housing affordability, and many local state governments are also now talking about housing affordability and trying to push the locals to do something about the
Well, people need a place to live, and ultimately, all politics are local. All
exactly
housing is local. I mean, it's like I can't,
voter scare. Voter scare.
right.
I think ultimately voter scare. It's not a problem that's just for young people trying to find housing in expensive markets near job centers. It's also for their parents and grandparents of their children that want to live close to them. They
That's
want to
right.
be around. And now they're like, okay, well, what if I get rid of my low 2% mortgage rate, right? Am I going to be able to go find a good deal somewhere close to my grandchildren? They're not happy about that. right?
Yeah.
And the majority of voters, they're older, they're wealthier, and they're not happy about the housing affordability crisis. And yes, Cato, I'm going to call it a crisis. And of course, they want something done about it. And I'm glad that we're having a discussion at every level of government, right? And that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's why I'm optimistic. I think things are going to change for the better. And by the way, um, in terms of just being purely academic about this topic, I've actually estimated housing supply elasticities across the country, and it's no mystery that the South builds more than the West Coast. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
these land use restrictions are lowering the magnitude of the supply response, right? Yes, builders can respond to increasing market prices and demand. Yes, they can. We're not saying the market is rigged like in a communist regime or something.
That's right.
Builders can respond,
That's
right?
right.
But the magnitude of the response is lower in places where you have stronger restrictions on building. And I'm gonna end it there because we could go all day on the topic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I saw you'd wound your own watch. All right, a lot of 2025 left. This is going to be a subject that I know that you and I will be talking about frequently. We'll come back and we'll talk about it soon. So thanks as always, Dr. O. For
Pleasure.
Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other fantastic podcasts at americastalking.com.